Hey, what's up, guys? This is BB Shea. Kelly called me in to do the podcast, but he didn't tell me that he was going to take a 35-minute phone call before we started. Here's just a little bit of me sitting here while he talked to God knows who. Anyway, here's the start of the podcast.
Welcome to another episode of The Square and the Round with Chris Kelly and BB Shea. You're sitting there holding our Nerf Football.
I know. It's been so long since I've seen one of these.
Did you grow up playing Nerf Football? You're younger than me.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, but they got really kind of advanced by the time I started playing with them.
That's an advanced one there. I mean, even that, that's smaller than the ones we used to have when I was a kid. And it was, but let me tell you, when Nerf came out, and this Nerf Football is in the studio here because recently it was voted to the Toy Hall of Fame. Nerf.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, I didn't know that.
Nerf, usually they do 3 toys, but this is the 25th anniversary of the Toy Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And so they added a 4th, and it was like it was the choice of the consumer. Yeah. And Nerf won that and got in.
Interesting.
As it should. I mean, that's an amazing toy.
Because the ones that were really popping when I was young, they were kind of like this shape, but they were smaller, but they had a tail on it. Yeah. And there was one where like you press a button and the tail came out. Yeah. It was really cool looking.
Now you could throw that for a mile and you can throw a spiral with it, but the original Nerf Football. Now I'm older than you are.
Yeah.
I don't tell anybody that, but I am. But the original Nerf Football when I was 8 years old, and you get it, and it's the size of a football, and it won't. Their whole thing was it won't break anything in the house, but of course it will knock over a lamp and break it.
And every house you went in that had one of these had a bite taken out of it for some reason. I don't know why.
Yes, a dog. That's exactly right.
I would do it. I would.
You'd do it yourself.
I kind of want to take a bite out of this right now.
Just keep your mouth
to keep
off
up with
that
the tradition.
Exactly. The dog or somebody would take a bite. Ours had a bite out of it.
I don't know why.
Ours had a bite out of it.
It never failed.
No, and it would lose its the outer coating, so it would all be stripped away. And woe be unto you if you leave it out in the rain. It gets wet and waterlogged. You have to wring it out.
Yes, that was the fun part. It was squishing it, getting all the water out of it.
It worked. It just worked. That's a great toy. See, and I don't think now you know what Nerf does. My kids who are young, they're teenagers now. But Nerf really got into those Nerf guns. I mean, my son had like a machine gun firing Nerf
Those
bullets.
Things have gotten advanced as well.
They're good.
Yeah.
We'd chase each other all over the house firing those things at each other. That's Nerf, man. Yeah, they turned it into something.
I'm telling you, man. Nerf, they got it worked out.
Were you surprised? This is about toys, too. I was surprised that Barbie was nominated for the Time Person of the Year. It came down between Barbie and Taylor Swift and like the president of China.
And did Taylor Swift win?
She won it.
Understandably. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm totally cool with that.
I was totally against it first.
Really?
Well, I just feel like, yes, I know how big Taylor Swift is.
You think it should be somebody like diplomatic?
I do.
Not
I think
like
it should be a politician.
Yeah.
But then my wife said, she sat me down and said, here's why you're wrong. She thought Taylor Swift should win it. She had more impact on the American economy maybe than anybody this year.
Yeah.
Maybe. And she's worldwide. I mean, now she's on tour wherever else, Yeah. She had more impact on pop culture. She started dating Travis Kelce, which elevated him.
That's true.
I mean, sports. She had an impact on that this year. She really just covered it all.
She was all over the place all year long.
But for whatever reason, my brain just goes to it has to be Vladimir Putin or the president of China or King Charles.
Because Time Magazine is an institution.
Yes.
And I feel like you kind of water it down when you put. Of course, Taylor Swift has influence.
Yes.
But I feel like I get where you're coming from. I feel like it's kind of below Time Magazine.
I do too.
To put Taylor Swift on there.
Me too.
And the fact that they even nominated an inanimate object.
I hate that.
That's kind of weird to me too.
They did the personal computer. I think it was 2000. I don't remember when, but or 99.
Barbie being because.
Oh, that's right.
I feel like Barbie could have easily been it when Barbie was really at its heyday.
Yeah.
Which maybe now is its heyday. Who knows?
Well, maybe now that it's come back with this movie and it was such a big deal.
I might have to look up like Barbie sales since the movie's come out.
Do
you think
huge.
It's increased?
I do. I think
I would think so
by
too.
a lot, I would say.
Yeah, and I hear it's going to get nominated for a lot of Oscars too.
Is it a hot toy for Christmas or kids?
It could be. I don't know.
But interestingly, the Barbie movie was not really made for kids, but more for adults.
True.
Of course, I haven't seen it yet either. And
I was going to ask, have you seen it?
Do you think I have not. Do you think it is going to be nominated for Oscars?
I think Ryan Gosling's getting nominated. I think Margot Robbie's getting nominated. As far as like picture and stuff like that, I doubt it. But I feel like the actors will be.
You think it deserves that?
No, I don't. But that's the thing about I've got gripes with the Oscars. Yeah. They have really fallen off the last couple of years.
Oh, you think?
Yes, the fact that a few years ago Black Panther got nominated for Best Picture, which was a travesty. And
you think so?
I 100% agree. There's no reason why that movie should have been nominated for Best Picture. And ever since then, I have lost all credibility with the Oscars.
Well, I have not seen Black Panther, but I heard a lot of people saying how much they love. I think because it was just so popular.
But that's not the Oscars.
No,
though.
It's not.
And Black Panther is a fine movie. It's not an Oscar movie.
Yeah,
it's a superhero movie.
When you look at movies, you can see which ones are.
Absolutely. Like, they're starting to come out now.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
They come out at Christmas time, yeah. That's interesting to hear you say that because I heard a lot of people. Now, I'm going to be honest here. I heard a lot of African Americans saying we want this movie nominated because it represents us and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Oscar committee felt pressure because, they had been for a while called like Lily White. And they only nominated white actors and that kind of thing. Did they feel pressure to put that movie in? I haven't even seen it, so I don't know.
And I hear that argument and I understand it, but if you see, people only pay attention to Best Picture and Best Actor. There was a span in right when that argument was going along, where the best director for 3 or 4 years was a Hispanic person.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you go back and look at best director, there was a lot of representation from different cultures that were winning awards. It just wasn't the stuff that people pay attention to.
Well, the movie that won last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
I got like 20 minutes through.
I heard it's trash.
It's intense. Like, it's a lot.
I heard it's awful.
You really have to dig in.
I've heard some people say it's a big mess.
Yeah, it is.
And a lot of people said that got nominated and won because of the Asian influence.
True. That could have been it. I really think it was a really original idea.
You do.
I think that's got a lot to do with it.
To see more movies. I used to see every Oscar movie that came out, to look good at parties.
Yeah, of course.
I would always try to,
and see, now I think I'm going to start watching all the Oscar movies.
Do that.
Yeah, there's a lot that are coming out recently that I'm interested in.
Well, you'll be our reporter on that then when it gets time to. In February it comes out.
Yes.
I just was reading that the Oscars are going to be on an hour earlier this year.
I like that.
So 7 o'clock Eastern time. That's smart.
I like that. Honestly, it should start at 5.
I agree.
I don't know why everything's got to be so late.
Earlier the better.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. This is about movies too. Yeah. Last week you told the incredibly anticlimactic story about your near-death experience.
Speaking of, we got an email from a gentleman. Did you read that email?
I have it.
Yeah. Okay. Please continue. Yes.
A gentleman says he's in Texas. And he says that he heard your discussion about your near-death experience. You were in the crowd in the movie The Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
And there had been some sort of, I guess, news that maybe somebody would go in and cause problems and shoot up.
They were going to amp up security.
Yep,
yeah.
That's right. And you saw a guy that you thought looked sketchy. And correct me if I'm wrong. At one point, he got up to go to this wherever the concession stand.
Yeah.
And then came back. And you told your friend, that's it. Yeah, we're out of here.
We're dead. We're going to die today. Today is our last day on Earth. Yeah.
And so when I was waiting for the ... what did he do? The answer was nothing. We saw the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And you were so frantic about it, you couldn't even remember the end of the movie.
I have no idea what happened.
He had the same experience. Yeah. This guy says in Texas, big crowd, wife there, watching folks because...
Yeah, because when you talk about it, you come on edge about it.
Yeah, that's right. And so he says near the end of the movie, a guy who they thought was sketchy got up, went out to the concession stand for a long time, came back, reeked of cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
And so he told us, don't worry, he's just there smoking a couple of cigarettes. Yeah. So that was that. But then near the final scene, somebody stood up and went toward the front of the theater and stood there next to the door. Now that would freak me out.
See, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
That would freak me out.
Yeah. But I feel like people were doing that just because they knew people would be on edge.
Oh, you
just
think
to mess with people.
They were messing with people.
I really feel like the dude that did that to me in my movie was just trolling us. I feel like he knew what he looked like in that situation, and he was just making us nervous.
I don't think you can mess with people like that.
I don't think you can either.
Especially since we have shootings. I mean, we just had one the other day at UNLV.
Yeah.
It's like shootings happen all the time. You can't play around with something.
But there are
like
just
that.
sick people out there. There are people who find that stuff funny.
Oh, I know. They'll mess around, and it's just like, of course, it's the dregs of society that do something like that, for sure. I had an interesting question for you. I think it's an interesting question for you. What is the most severe case? I read this online. The most severe case of mass stupidity you've ever witnessed, when that leads right into it, this stupidity. And one example was the toilet paper rush at the start of COVID when everybody was, hoarding toilet paper.
People were using like 100 ply a day.
When you'd walk into Walmart or Target or whatever, and the whole toilet paper and paper towel aisle was completely empty. Like we'd never get another chance to go and get it.
Yeah.
And I was one of those. There was I was at Costco, and a guy held up a container of Clorox wipes. He says, "These are the last we've got, last one." And I raced to, I got them.
Did you tackle anybody?
Well, you know how tall I am.
Yeah.
And he held them above his hand, and I just got it. And other people, women, were trying to get out of the way. I said, "No, sir."
And okay, keep going.
I'm getting that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good one. One guy says, and this would be your generation, a generation raised knowing how absolutely awful smoking is, yet excessively vaping, which is just as bad for you.
Yeah,
I
agree.
This is mass stupidity on display.
You know, it's a regional thing, but it happens every year here when it snows.
Oh, yeah.
Inevitably, the milk and the bread just get vanquished from the aisles of the grocery store.
It's 100% right.
Yeah, and nobody has ever learned their lesson on that. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because what's the first thing that's going to spoil is milk. Why wouldn't you buy water and non-perishables,
right,
but you're going to buy bread and milk? And
mold.
that's, as far as mass stupidity regionally, I think that's something that goes on here.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Because if there's even a whiff of snow flurries, you can't, that's true. All that stuff goes away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Milk, bread, eggs.
And it gets made fun of every year, and yet it still happens like clockwork. We're getting snow, race and get bread and milk.
They'll do the milk and bread alert. They'll say, "Oh, this is a 2-loafer. This is 2 inches of snow means a 2-loaf bread count for it." That's true. That's a good one.
But I don't know. See, I immediately go to Y2K.
That was something.
I was what, 8, 7 when that happened.
I was 37, 38 when that happened.
So that whole thing was kind of, I remember it happening, but it didn't make sense.
It was
to me.
nothing.
Yes.
It was absolutely nothing. And we all waited to see what would it be, because they created the computers with like 2 digits for years. Like 99 was the last one. So it went to 2000. They didn't know what would happen, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nothing. Well, can you imagine if that really did plunge us all into some economic hole that we never came out? That would have been crazy.
What did that even look like? I don't even know.
Well, we'll see it again next election.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it is, this November.
It's going to happen
we'll
regardless.
See it again in less than a year.
It's a waiting game at this point.
We'll wait and see how that goes.
Do you have any examples of that mass stupidity?
Well, some people say the COVID vaccine. How we all
how that goes, I get
right?
that. I get that.
What I hate, and this was actually mentioned when I read this article somewhere, and I totally agree with it. It's like whenever somebody is in peril or being beat up or whatever, and instead of helping people film,
that's
what people do.
And
now.
It's not. I think it's become the cancel thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that stems from that, where instead of helping people, we'd rather see somebody else
do it,
get whatever, punished for it. So
I guess I saw recently a boat was sinking. We talk about this. Maybe we might have talked about this. The
people were in the water, on the lifeboat,
and of course you've got video. And I'm watching on TV. It's like, why are you filming? Why in the world are you going for your phone? Keeping it above water. I just don't ever think of that.
And I feel like that, honestly, mass stupidity, filming anything. Mm-hmm. You see kids or parents at their kids' recitals filming. Yeah. I'm like, are you really going to watch that again?
Never do.
You're never going to watch that shoot.
We watched our kids, when relatives would come for Christmas after the Christmas pageant, we'd show it, but, they're not interested.
Exactly.
I hate to say that.
Did you really care? Honest to God.
I mean, I like seeing our kids up there, but anybody else, they don't care about that. They're not going to care one thing about seeing your kids sing, and you can't tell one from the other or anything like that. It doesn't really matter.
And nobody's going to say it was bad. It's all going to be the same thing.
I taped over a guy once. There was a guy here named who used to work for this radio station named Pete Bunch. Do you know this name?
I've heard the name. Yeah.
Okay, he's a great guy, but he scared me to death because he was a big presence. I was really young, and he had been in the radio business for many years. And he was tough, and his voice was like this. He was fond of saying, whenever the insurance meeting would happen, he'd go, "Bohica," which meant bend over, here it comes again. That was his saying. If somebody called a meeting, he'd go, "Bohica." That meant bend over.
That's such a classic thing for a guy of that generation
bend
to say.
Bend over, here it comes
They're
again.
Little sayings and their acronyms.
Oh, yes.
I love it.
Well, that was a good one, I thought. And if people told him, I loved this about him, too. People would say, have a good one. Thanks for noticing. Oh, here's another great one.
Yeah.
When we would get calls. Now they do it. Of course, they have alerts on their phone. But when it snowed, when we'd all be panicking, somebody would call and say what they had to do was say their code from school.
Yeah.
And give us the school closing. They would call up to the special hotline here and say, "We've got a school closing for such and such county. My code is milkshake." and it was all the same code for everybody. And he would go, "My code is ice cream cone. Lick me." And the guy on the other end of the phone would be like, "No, you don't understand. You don't understand. My code is milkshake." And he'd say, "My code is ice cream cone. Lick me." He didn't care. Loved it.
I have one that I really think you'll appreciate. It's sort of kind of on the set. My Uncle Dobie, I know we've talked about him before.
Dobie,
every time, you know how people will go like, is a 100-pound rabbit a big money? Like when it's a rhetorical question, right? He had one. Yeah. Whenever somebody would ask him a question, the answer was yes. He would go, "Does Rose Kennedy have a black dress?"
Oh my God. And now that really, I told you my theories on the Kennedy assassination last week.
Exactly. That's kind of funny.
Oh, it is.
It took me a while. I mean, he's been saying it ever since I was a kid. I didn't get it when I was a kid, and now I'm like, oh, she's
funny,
had
but
like
incredibly
50 family members die.
That's as insensitive as it gets.
It is. He would say that all the time.
Like, does a bear crap in the woods?
Exactly.
Does Rose Kennedy have a black dress?
Yes.
I never heard that before.
I know, right?
That's pretty good.
I agree. It's underrated, I think.
Now, back when Pete Bunch worked here, this is about like when you'd put your kids on display in front of the family. His little kid, who was probably 6, was on the air with him, was on the radio with him, and he recorded it. So the next day, I came in to do the radio show and accidentally recorded right over it. And he had left it in here, so I just stuck the tape in. At that time, you had to tape over things. You know? So I just stuck it in to tape our own show. And later, he came to me and said, "You insensitive jerk, you tape." And I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't even know. I didn't even know." But I felt so bad and also so frightened of him. Of course, he was really mad about that.
That's how I feel about you. Just every time you walk into the room, I just get scared. I'm like, what is he going to do today?
I know. As you should. You should always. Have that
so you were explaining. You're like, yeah, he was this guy who was in the industry. I was really young. I'm like, you're kind of talking about me right now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I put off that scary
no, you
vibe.
Don't.
He put off a real scary vibe. Plus, I'm always such a pleaser, and I taped over his son. And he's like, I'll never get that back. It was the first time on the radio. I was like, oh my God.
I'm not gonna lie, you could afford to be a little bit more dickish from times.
You think me?
Yeah, you're a little too nice.
Too nice.
I feel like sometimes you could have some leeway to be a little bit more dicky.
Probably. I hate that feeling.
I get it. I completely understand.
I hate the feeling of like anytime I really put somebody in their place, and once in a while, but I hate it later. I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. Even with my kids. It's the wrong way to feel.
It's not a good feeling. No, it's really not.
I hate doing that. It happens all the time.
Or like having people disappointed in you, or you feel like you let people down. I can't stand that feeling.
Well, I'm so bad. I play Pickle Ball all the time. Yeah. When somebody against me hits a shot, because it's my call when it's on my side of the court, and it's like centimeter out. Yeah. Oftentimes I'll just let it go because I don't want to have any kind of
rock the boat.
I don't want to have any kind of altercation. Yeah. Even though it's my call, and if I call it out, they're going to go along with it, but they'll stare you down sometimes, and they'll be like, oh, and then it makes me feel bad for the rest of the time. If I make a close call against somebody, I have this. I'm on pins and needles the rest of the match. It's really stupid.
I get it. No, I completely understand. Like,
but it's just pickleball.
I'm like that with playing basketball. Like there have been several times where like I could have easily blocked this dude's shot, but in my head, I'm like, I'm going to block his shot, and it's going to break his nose.
You think?
And so I would just stop playing defense completely. Yeah,
I never called fouls.
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah,
you play pickup basketball. Yeah. The last time I played pickup basketball, a few years ago, I'd play, and I'm big, so I'd get the ball down low, and I'd just get hacked. Yeah. But I'd, miss the shot, and my teammates would be like, didn't he foul you? And I'd be like, no, I don't know.
It don't matter.
I never called it. I'm not too wussified,
I don't think that's a wussified move,
I don't know. I just never
play the game.
I mean, I never call that
stuff.
Well,
speaking of sports, I know this is kind of late, but what do you think about the college football playoff? What are your opinions on the 4 teams that got in?
That's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up.
Do you think it was right? Because I've got some hot opinions on this.
I think I would have probably done the same thing. I think I would have gone because the way it's set up, you've got 5 power conferences, and only 4 teams get in. So obviously Michigan's in; they're undefeated. Sure. Obviously Washington's in. You don't think Washington should be? You're shaking your head at Washington.
No, I don't think Washington should have been in.
You don't think you think Florida State over Washington?
No, I think Georgia.
Oh, Georgia.
I think Georgia should have got in. Continue with what you were saying.
Okay, well, so I think obviously Washington has to get in because the Pac-12 is better than it's been in a long time, and they won it, and they beat Oregon twice, and they're undefeated. Mm-hmm. And then Texas, if Alabama's in, Texas has to be in because they beat them.
True.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Alabama won the SEC, which for 100 years has been the best conference.
Of course.
I think you have to put Alabama in. Yeah. And I hate that Florida State got left out, and I think if their quarterback had been healthy, they probably would have made it. But it all came, if Alabama doesn't complete that 4th and 30-yard pass against Auburn, then Georgia might be in. Not
you're 100%
State.
right.
I think Georgia would probably drop to 4th.
Yeah.
And instead, you think Georgia ought to be in?
I think so.
So who's your 4?
So I think it should have been Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, and Texas.
Really?
I don't think that Washington should have been in, because if you're going to start playing this conference championships don't matter and undefeated don't matter, well, then Georgia probably should have been in.
I don't think
Washington, yes. And granted, Oregon's a great team. Washington beat them twice. Oregon should have beat them in the Pac-12 championship. There was a controversial fumble, incomplete pass called near the end of the game that should have been a fumble.
Yeah.
But I think that the other reason Washington made it in is because they have a Heisman candidate, the guy who's probably going to win the Heisman.
Okay.
Now, you can't sit here and tell me that if Georgia, like Florida State, would have won the SEC championship, won their last 2 games with their 4th-string quarterback, they wouldn't have made it into
I think you're right.
the Final Four.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And, as far as the Power 5 conferences and this conference being better than this conference, I don't think that should be a part of the conversation.
Do you know who I've heard a lot of people say are the best 4 teams? If you really want the best 4 teams, do you know who they are? Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State.
Yeah, 100%.
Those are the best 4 teams.
I agree.
But then you start the season as a Washington or an Oregon or a Florida State with no chance. You can't go.
And I agree, but at the same time, I think that if you want to get technical, ACC beat more SEC teams than and vice versa this year.
Then that would be an argument for Florida State.
How is ACC a worse conference than,
Well, history.
Of course. But I mean,
Georgia and Alabama have won it so much. No, I agree with you. I agree.
This year.
It's a tough call. It's
and
really tough.
I said it 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said, if things play out, Florida State is going to get screwed over.
Their big mistake, to me, the committee, was they had Florida State at 4th as they went into their championship game. Then they won it and got moved back to 5th.
Absolutely.
It's like start them at 6. As soon as the quarterback gets hurt, knock them down to 5th or 6th. That way you can say, hey, you weren't in it. You didn't matter.
And now they have to start judging wins based on how bad you beat teams. I'm like, that's not –
you win.
A win is a win.
And Florida State fans, and they're screaming about this, they say they've got a good enough defense that they would beat these teams. They would hold them out of the end zone.
I don't know about that.
But let them prove it.
But you give them a shot. But here's my thing. Washington isn't going to beat Texas.
You don't think?
Washington's not going to beat Alabama or Georgia if they happen to beat Texas. We're going to get the same thing that happened last year where TCU gets murdered by Georgia in the finals, but they wanted to be so – I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that West Coast teams just don't get a lot of love.
Oh, really?
And because of the Heisman winner.
Really?
I think that played a lot of it too.
Well, I've heard people say that the reason the Pac-12 is literally going away because they're all moving to the Big Ten and the SEC is because they've gotten so few teams into the playoff. Like Washington's been left out sometimes because they are West Coast and nobody and they're not like what you're saying is true. Georgia's in, Alabama both in, And so because they didn't make the tournament enough times, they've dwindled to nothing that in money. And so now they're moving out, and there's going to be no.
But they've had opportunities, like with I think Washington's made it to the playoff before,
and lost.
Oregon's made it, and they've got murdered. I'm like, there is a big difference between West Coast ball and Southern ball. And
I think there's a big difference between Southern Ball and Big Ten. I don't think Big Ten's any good.
I agree 100%.
I mean, Michigan, I like Michigan. I think they're probably overrated.
They're going to get murdered by Alabama or Texas.
So?
Yes, absolutely. Alabama's probably going to win it all again. Yeah.
And if not for that 4th and 30 pass against Auburn, they wouldn't be in it.
Absolutely.
And they're probably going to win it because they're probably the best team left.
True.
And they've figured it out. They've got Nick Saban, all of that.
Of course.
Yeah.
And they got history around this. And I agree that if Alabama's in, you can't not put Texas in.
Because Texas beat them.
That was hinging on Texas or Alabama.
Texas beat them, exactly. Yeah. So you think that it's going to be Alabama and Texas, and Alabama will win?
I think Alabama's going to win.
Yeah.
I don't have faith in Washington. I could see them beating Texas. I don't think they will.
Right.
But if they do beat Texas, they're going to get destroyed in the championship game.
By Alabama.
Yes.
Well, we shall see. I don't know if Alabama. I don't think they're as good as they have been in years past. They've had trouble with other teams.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think they are. I think there have been better teams in the past, but I think they're playing really good ball right now.
Well, they are. They've gotten it together. And Nick Saban, I mean, he knows what he's doing.
Absolutely. He's been there before.
That's good sports talk right there. I like that.
I know this isn't a sports podcast, but that's been a hot topic.
That is a huge topic. What do you like the fact they're moving to 12 teams next year?
I do. I wish it was 8. I think 12's a bit of a jump.
I do too.
Because
I think some of those teams, the 8 through 12, 9 through 12 are going to
because I think having 8 this year would have really cleared up some problems.
But the problem with that is the Ohio State-Michigan game doesn't mean anything. And it's such a huge game at the end of the season. The Auburn, like if Ohio State and Michigan if it had been 8 or 12 teams, they'd both be in.
Sure.
So who'd care about that?
But
game?
then that's kind of like, but then the possibility of them playing in a playoff game.
Yeah.
That's like when Carolina and Duke played in the Final Four a couple years ago.
I didn't like that.
Can't watch it.
Can't watch
Unwatchable. But imagine the ratings that are going to come in for that game. The possibility that they could meet for a national championship, though.
Yeah.
Imagine.
You are a Duke fan.
Yes.
I'm a Carolina fan.
Yes.
A friend of mine who is a Carolina fan after that game said this rivalry's over.
It is.
Carolina has won it
because
they won the one Final Four game they ever played.
If somewhere in the future they end up playing for the national championship,
that would do
that's
it.
a whole different
That would
story.
be a different story.
That
or
would
even
be
in the Final Four again.
That would be the end-all, be-all.
Yeah.
But for right now, as a Duke fan, I hate to say it, yes, Carolina has an advantage of the
I've
rivalry.
heard members of the committee, I've heard it reported that members of the committee will never set it up where Duke would play Carolina for the national championship. They keep them on the same side of the bracket.
I think if they want to save it, if they want to try to save college basketball, they would try to do anything in their power to do that.
To make them.
Yes.
Well, the semifinal was a pretty big deal. That was the Final Four. They keep them as far away from each other as they can so that they don't have to play until they get to the Final Four and never the championship. They always put them. I've heard that's intentional, that they don't want a national because you've got the national championship surrounded by only 8 miles. It's like that's so regional.
But still.
Huge.
Still, though.
Yeah, I agree. It would be enormous.
I mean, imagine.
Yeah. Well, they've had Alabama play Georgia in the football championship.
They don't have a problem doing that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
North Carolina and Duke are literally, you could walk from one place to the other.
But they're literally the two biggest names in college basketball.
They are. Yeah. You're right. That's true. Wow, I like your feisty sports takes.
I've been thinking about that a lot the past few days.
That's pretty good. So you're the only person I've heard to want Washington out.
I think if you're going to do that to Florida State, I feel like there's a conversation to be had about doing that to Washington as well.
My goodness, undefeated and winners of the Pac-12. You don't care. You take
undefeated winners of the ACC.
You don't. Yeah, well, right.
And that's a Power 5 conference too.
No,
it's the same. They have the exact same resume.
They do.
The exact same resume.
Well, that conversation. But see, I think this kind of conversation is good for college football. So when they move to 12, it's like, well, that goes away.
I agree. And see, I know people have been saying that as well. But nobody's going to talk about it when Liberty is, in the playoff.
Yeah.
Who cares? They're going to get murdered. It doesn't matter.
No, you're right. I think you're right about that. But I'll be watching those games. I can tell you
100%. Yeah.
All right. That's a good. I like that too. Yeah. Should we end on that, or do you have an overrated, underrated?
I don't have one.
You don't have one today.
I don't have one. I'm sorry.
You don't have an overrated, underrated. I'll give you that. I think I just read this today. I think electric cars are overrated.
Ooh.
I read a stat a couple of days ago that electric cars cause 80% more problems than gas-powered cars.
What kind of problems?
Like breakdowns, ill-fitting, battery goes out, ill-fitting parts inside the engine, and they have to be fixed.
Could you see yourself, driving an electric vehicle?
No.
Really?
I don't see that.
Never.
I don't. Well, maybe. I've had car dealers tell me that hybrid is a better way to go.
True. I've heard the same thing.
Full electric. And those batteries, we're not there yet. I don't think we're there yet.
But I think in the grand scheme of things, the electric vehicle is it's so new. It's so new.
Yeah.
The technology is so new.
Yes.
I think in the next 10 or 20 years when they start to perfect it, then that's when you're going to see a takeover of it. I mean, because it's really Tesla?
And a few others.
I know Nissan maybe has one. I think Ford's got one.
Yeah.
But when it becomes the standard, I'll probably get one.
I just don't know when it's going to. I felt like it would be farther along than it is now.
Yeah.
I felt like we'd be seeing more charging stations than we do now.
True, but COVID.
We can blame that on everything. That's what we should always blame.
If you really want to think about
when we miss a week of this show, we should say COVID. What are we supposed to do? My God. It always goes back to that. COVID.
It does. It ruined a lot.
I might get my COVID shot. I'm starting to get scared of that, too. I might go get it. I don't know. I'm thinking about it.
Good for you.
I'm going to get the flu shot probably today. I'll be awful next week.
All right.
Square in the round. Good one.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Hot sports takes.
I know, right?
And you know what I thought you were going to say?
Yeah.
Did you see the Yankees got one soda? No, I didn't see that.
Oh, you want to talk about that too? I mean,
no,
I'm not sold on that either. But anyway,
are you not? I'm not
either. We'll see.
Big names.
Big names.
We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
That's it. The Square in the Round. Get it wherever you get your podcasts, except a few places. Thank you very much for listening.